You sit at your desk, the same way you always do. Notebook open, highlighter ready, lo-fi beats playing softly in the background. You read the chapter twice, maybe 3 times. You underline the important sentences. You copy a few into your notes. You feel productive. The next morning, it's gone. You stare at the blank space in your mind like it's mocking you. You know you studied. You remember sitting there. But the content? It's fog. It vanished. Again, you blame yourself, right? You say you're distracted, lazy, not smart enough. But what if I told you it's not your fault at all? What if your brain is doing exactly what it's supposed to do? And what if the real problem is how we were taught to study in the first place? In Japan, students memorize over 2,000 kanji characters. Not for a test, but for life. They don't forget them. They don't panic the night before an exam. And they don't burn out halfway through. So what's their secret? It's not about effort. It's about efficiency. It's not more hours. It's the right method. Most of us were raised on the illusion of studying, rereading, highlighting, cramming, thinking if we just spend more time, we'll finally remember. But neuroscience and centuries of Japanese learning strategies say otherwise. There's a way that doesn't feel like punishment, a way that respects your time, your mind, and your energy. In this video, I'll show you 5 powerful learning techniques inspired by the way Japanese students train their memory. But this isn't about copying another culture. It's about learning how to learn, for real. Because when you understand how your brain actually holds on to knowledge, you'll never study the same way again. Let's begin. Imagine trying to learn how to swim by reading about swimming. You read every chapter. You highlight every key term. Stroke, kick, breath. You feel confident. But the first time you jump in the water, you sink. Because reading about swimming is not the same as swimming. And reading about knowledge is not the same as remembering it. This is the mistake almost everyone makes when studying. We mistake input for learning. We read, we watch, we underline. It feels productive because it's passive. There's no friction, no resistance, no pressure. But your brain doesn't grow stronger from comfort. It grows through retrieval, the act of pulling knowledge out, not just pushing it in. That's where active recall comes in. And it's one of the core techniques used by Japanese students for centuries. Instead of simply rereading, they constantly test themselves. Not with official exams, but with practice sessions where they force the brain to retrieve information without help. Why does this work? Because every time you struggle to remember, you're reinforcing the neural pathways connected to that knowledge. It's like lifting weights for your memory. The harder it feels, the stronger the signal. There's a famous quote, "Learning happens when remembering feels like effort." So, how do you apply this? It's simple, but uncomfortable. After you study a topic, close your book. Grab a blank sheet of paper, and try to write down everything you remember, not just keywords, not just fragments, everything, as if you're teaching it to someone else. At first, it will feel like you're failing. You'll realize how much you forgot, and that's exactly the point. Every gap you find is a signal, and every time you force your mind to reach, you're making it stronger. This is the difference between a student who crams and forgets and one who struggles and remembers. Because struggling isn't a flaw, it's the process. Japanese students know this. They don't avoid mental effort, they chase it. They see recall not as a test, but as training. And with every session, they're not just reviewing information, they're rebuilding it. So the next time you feel stuck while trying to remember something, don't panic. Smile. Because that struggle means your brain is finally doing the work it needs to grow. You're not forgetting, you're learning. When you see someone fluent in another language, it looks like magic. They speak with confidence, understand instantly. Their brain flows from word to word without effort. But what you don't see are the micro steps. The first awkward phrases, the small cards with verbs, the quiet repetitions under their breath on the way to school. That's what the Kumon method is all about. Not perfection, not pressure, but consistent, focused repetition of small, manageable steps. It was originally designed in Japan for children struggling with math. Instead of overwhelming them with full chapters, the method broke learning into microdoses. One concept, one page, one problem at a time. Each day, the student builds confidence. Each step becomes a foundation for the next. This technique isn't just for children. It works for everyone because it respects how the brain really learns. Your brain doesn't thrive on cramming. It thrives on layering. Small exposures over time, like drops of ink that slowly stain the whole page. And that's where the real transformation happens. Not in sudden breakthroughs, but in quiet repetition. We live in a culture obsessed with fast results. Learn anything in 24 hours. Fluent in 7 days. But your mind doesn't work that way. Your brain values safety, familiarity, rhythm. The Kumon method taps into that rhythm, not with pressure, but with predictability. One small step repeated every day is more powerful than 5 chaotic hours once a week. This is what James Clear called atomic habits. The idea that 1% improvement each day leads to exponential growth. Not dramatic, not Instagram-worthy, but real and permanent. So instead of waiting for motivation to strike, build a routine that requires no motivation. 2 pages, 10 minutes, the same time, the same place. And let that quiet rhythm change your relationship with learning. Japanese students don't become masters through marathons. They do it through ritual, through pace, through patience. The Kumon way isn't glamorous, but it works. And if you've ever felt like you're constantly starting over, maybe the problem isn't you. Maybe it's the lack of a system that allows you to stay consistent even when life gets loud. Start smaller, stick longer, because if you want your knowledge to last a lifetime, you have to build it in a way that your brain can carry, one piece at a time. Imagine planting a seed and then flooding it with water for 3 hours straight. Will it grow faster? Number. In fact, it'll probably drown. Now imagine you water that seed once and then forget about it. Same problem. Your brain works the same way. Memory isn't built in one sitting, it's cultivated over time. This is the principle behind spaced repetition, reviewing information at gradually increasing intervals just before your brain forgets it. Instead of repeating the same thing 10 times in one day, you spread it out. Once today, again tomorrow, 3 days later, then a week, then a month. Each review acts like watering the roots just before they dry out. It keeps the memory alive, not by force, but by rhythm. This technique is backed by decades of research. But Japanese students have used versions of it for generations. They don't cram the night before, they review systematically, using memory cycles that allow the brain to do what it's naturally good at. Remember patterns over time. There's even a curve that maps this, the forgetting curve, first studied by Hermann Ebbinghaus in the 19th century. It shows how quickly the brain dumps information that isn't revisited. Within 24 hours, we lose 50 to 70% of what we learned. By day 3, we're left with scraps. But here's the key. If you interrupt that curve with the right review, just before the drop, you flatten it. You turn a temporary memory into a lasting one. Apps like Anki and Notion have built-in spaced repetition tools, but you don't need fancy software. You can do this with flashcards, with review schedules, even with a calendar and colored pens. The principle is simple. Review right before you forget, not right after you learned. This one shift saves you hours of revision and gives you back control over your time. Because your brain isn't a storage unit, it's a garden. And the memories you want to keep, they need to be watered, not drowned, not abandoned, just touched at the right moment. And when you master that timing, you don't just learn better, you learn smarter. There's a reason you struggle to stay consistent. It's not that you're lazy, not that you lack willpower, it's that your goals are too big and your system is too fragile. You decide to study 2 hours a day. Day 1, perfect. Day 2, decent. Day 3, life gets messy. You skip, you feel guilty, then you quit. Sound familiar? That's what most people call lack of discipline, but the Japanese call it something else, bad design. Enter Kaizen. Kaizen means change for better. It's not about doing more, it's about doing slightly better, consistently, 1% better each day, just enough to be doable, small enough to not scare your brain, but powerful enough to create compounding returns over time. If you improve 1% every day for a year, you're not 365% better, you're 37 times better. That's not motivation, that's math. The beauty of Kaizen is that it removes the pressure of changing your life overnight. You don't need to study for hours. You need to study for 6 minutes. 2 minutes of active recall. 2 minutes of spaced repetition. 2 minutes of focused practice. That's it. The win is not the result. It's the ritual. Because when something becomes part of your identity, I'm someone who studies every day, you stop relying on motivation and start relying on rhythm. Kaizen works because it speaks your brain's native language. Safety, simplicity, sustainability. It's not about going harder, it's about going longer. So when you feel like skipping today because it won't make a difference, remember this. The brain doesn't change in explosions. It changes in layers. And that 1%, that small moment when you show up anyway, might just be the brick that holds the entire wall together. Japanese students don't study more than you. They just study with a better rhythm, a more human pace, a mindset that honors growth over perfection. Kaizen isn't about speed. It's about staying in the game long enough to let the process work. Because no one becomes brilliant overnight, but anyone can become 1% better today. Focus is not a switch, it's a doorway. And most people never walk through it. We sit down to study, phone on the table, tabs open, notifications buzzing. We read a sentence, check the time. Open a new tab, go back, start over. We don't lack focus, we lack entry points. In Japanese learning culture, there's a concept called shu. the act of preparing the mind to enter a state of full presence. Before students even touch a book, they perform small rituals. They organize their desk, they use the same pen, they take a breath, they light a candle, they bow their head, not out of superstition, but out of respect for the process. These rituals are signals to the brain. This moment is different. This moment matters. And that signal is powerful. Because when you repeat a ritual enough times, your brain stops resisting. It stops fighting distractions. It starts associating that routine with focus, automatically. That's the art of focus. Not forcing your mind to obey, but training it to enter a new mode. Think about athletes. Before a race, they stretch. Before a match, they breathe, visualize, bounce on their feet. They don't just perform, they prepare. Your brain deserves the same. Want to get into deep focus? Don't wait for inspiration. Create a ritual. Use the same playlist. Wear the same hoodie. Clear your space, turn off your phone. Touch the page, look at the time, breathe, and do it again. And again, until your brain knows it's time. Students in Japan don't just learn with discipline, they learn with presence. Because when you enter a task with intention, when your whole body understands that this moment is sacred, you remember more, you absorb more, you become more. The glitch isn't that we can't focus, it's that we never tell the mind when to start. But when you train that signal, you don't need force, you need ritual. And soon, that ritual becomes your doorway into the best version of yourself. You've been told your whole life that learning is about effort, that the more hours you put in, the more knowledge you'll get out. But now you know, that's not true. Real learning, the kind that lasts, isn't about working harder. It's about working smarter, softer, and more consistently. The Japanese didn't build their memory on pressure. They built it on rhythm, on small rituals, on quiet repetition. They didn't rely on willpower. They relied on systems, on presence, on respect for the process. They didn't try to memorize everything in a day. They became the kind of person who learns every day. And that's the shift that changes everything. Because you don't need to become a genius. You just need to become someone who shows up. Even if it's for 6 minutes, even if it's percent better. You've learned how to recall actively, how to build knowledge through micro steps, how to water your memory at the right time, how to train your brain with ritual, how to improve gently, daily, without burning out. The only question now is, will you actually use it? The top 1% of learners don't have more talent, they have better strategy. So start small, show up today, turn your next study session into a ritual, test yourself without fear, and watch how different learning feels when you do it right. If this video helped shift the way you think about memory, focus, and study, consider subscribing. Because here, we don't glorify hustle. We study with presence, we grow with rhythm, and we learn not just to pass tests, but to live better.